So I had this message from a musician friend of mine on Instagram, and she says, "Hi Paul." "Hi Amy. My manager tells me not to bother with music videos." "Really?" "Yeah, really. He says they're a waste of time, nobody does them anymore, and just don't bother. It's old hat." I wanted to know your opinion on it. Well, he's kind of right, but he's kind of wrong at the same time. I think we need to start with a bit of a history lesson, because back in the 80s and the 90s, videos were huge, and they were huge because everyone was making them for television. In fact, we can go back a bit further than that, because it was the Beatles that really started this off, because they didn't want to appear on Top of the Pops, couldn't be bothered to show up, so they'd send a video that they'd made instead, and the BBC could play that out in their absence. And then in 1981 we got music television, and things changed again. Essentially in the 1980s, if you brought out a single and it didn't have a video with it, well, you can forget having a hit, because that wasn't going to happen. And of course then the budgets got bigger, the videos got more elaborate, it all got a bit cinematic, and if I'm totally honest with you, a bit out of control, especially with Michael Jackson's Thriller. And then in 2005 we got YouTube, another big change, and then things started to scale back a bit because musicians could then take control and make their own videos, so the budgets got smaller and the quality started to go downhill. Essentially what I'm saying is, over the last 50 years that music video's been around, things have always been evolving, and now we're in a social media generation, things are evolving again. So the music video hasn't died, it's just changed. So back in the day, before we had social media and YouTube, we had MTV and Top of the Pops, which were basically like radio shows with pictures, and that's how we discovered new music. We'd hear or see a song several times over, often in full, and then if we liked what we heard, we'd pop down the shops and we'd buy one of these things. But now it's different. We normally tend to discover new music in small chunks. We'd like hear a clip on TikTok or Instagram, or maybe pop into a shop, hear something we like and Shazam it so we can save it to our phone for later. So the music industry has evolved, but the music video industry hasn't really. We're still making music videos like we were 50 years ago, like the Beatles were doing. Now music videos still got a really important role to play. In fact, if anything, it's more important now than it ever was. I'll come onto that in a second. But people like me who make music videos for a living need to change what we do, so we're working in the current climate, and this is what you need to do if you're going to make your own music video too. So there are 4 things that you really need to focus on to change your music video so it works in the social media generation. Now, I hope you're sitting down for this bit. This is going to sting a little bit, but it has to be said, most people on social media won't hear your new song. And they won't hear it because most of us flick through social media on mute, don't we? In fact, some stats say as little as 10% of people are actually listening. So if that's the case, how in the hell are you going to get your new song that you've poured hours of work and love into the ears of your followers on social media? You do it with visuals. If your visuals are so strong that people can't help themselves and they have to click the mute button off to hear what's going on, then you've got them. But in order to sell a new song on social media, you need to do it with video first and not with audio first. So if people aren't listening to your video on social media, what they're going to experience is pretty much like this. It's just you dancing around in silence and randomly opening and closing your mouth. It looks silly, it's pointless, and makes no sense to anyone who can't hear what's going on. And this is where most musicians and video makers go wrong. They completely ignore the 90% of people who aren't listening to your video. So include them, and include them with text. Much like you would if you were making a TV show for someone who's deaf, you'd have subtitles, wouldn't you? And this is exactly what you need to do. I mean, you can put some lyrics up if you want to, but why not go one stage further than that and tell them exactly what's going on? This is the video for my new single. You can watch it in full, download it in full, buy it in full, see me in concert, any of the above, by clicking on the link in my bio. That's a much better way of engaging people who can't listen, and if you don't do that, you're going to lose them. So video needs to be stunning visually, and you need to include text for the 90% of people who can't listen. Let's just say you've made a new song and it's 4 minutes long and a video to go with it. Are you going to post the whole thing on Instagram as it is? Of course you're not. That'd be bonkers, wouldn't it? Because we all know shorter video does really well, in fact better than longer video on Instagram. So when I make a music video, sure, I think about the whole song and the whole video, but I also think about how many short clips I can get out of that song that would look great on social media and maybe still even include the song's hook. Almost like little adverts for the longer video. Think of your video in two different ways. Think of it as a whole and think of it as a series of short clips you can use on social media. Okay, I'm going to assume you know what an aspect ratio is, but if you don't, I'm going to briefly explain it. You're watching me right now in 16:9, which is landscape. That's one aspect ratio. And if you're watching social media, for instance, like Instagram, normally most videos there are in 9:16 or portrait. That's another aspect ratio. Now, normally most videos are made in 16:9 or landscape for the likes of YouTube and Vimeo and television. And if you're making your videos that way, well done, great, correct. However, you can't ignore social media, and that's in portrait. And portrait works best on the likes of Instagram and TikTok because most people watch that kind of stuff on their mobile phone where they're holding it like a phone. So how do you make a portrait video and a landscape video at the same time without having to film it twice? This is where it gets a bit complicated, but it's doable. So when I make my music videos, I make it with portrait in mind. I make sure all the action sits within that 9:16 window, but the whole thing still works in 16:9. So the golden rule is make your videos in 16:9, but make them with 9:16 in mind. So, has the music video died? Yeah, of course it hasn't. It's just evolved like the rest of the music industry, and we've got to evolve with it. And obviously, it'll continue evolving. And in fact, I'd argue that video is probably more important now than it ever has been for promoting your music because of all the people who aren't listening on social media, like I said before. So if you're making your own music videos, I hope all those little tips have helped. And if you want to have a chat about me helping you to make a video that works in the 21st century, pick up the phone. Let's have a chat the old-fashioned way. Do you know what I mean?